Hey again, psych fans. In this video, what I wanted to do is this is an part two, I guess, of my little role play we did a little while ago. We kind of zoomed through some of the anxiety disorders, I at least mentioned them, and I just want to kind of touch on each of them a little bit more and explain to you what they are. So the major anxiety disorders that were in that play and that we are in our book and what we're going to talk about here. Are several of them. So first of all, one of the more common one is something called GAD, generalized anxiety. All right, first of all, keep in mind when we talk about these, anxiety is a symptom. It is not a disorder in itself. Anxiety disorders are a class of disorders, all right? So when we're talking about GAD is a constant low level of anxiety. It's like all the time you're just on edge, like something's going to happen. People with GAD, because it is sort of a maintenance level, if you want to call it that, oftentimes are very, very good at hiding it. All right. But it's one of those things where it's called generalized because it's not really at one thing. Okay. They may be afraid of many things, or sometimes to the point where they don't even know. It's just like this vague, free-floating anxiety. All right. That is different from a phobia. All right, a phobia, first of all, is usually more intense, but also it is directed at a specific thing. A germ phobia, I'm afraid of germs. Arachnophobia, I'm afraid of spiders. In my play, someone was afraid of snakes. All right, so it's afraid of a specific thing. All right. Panic disorder, panic attacks are a lot harder to hide. People who have a panic attack will often they'll be breathing heavy, their heart is racing, they may even pass out from being hyper over, breathing too hard. And people with a panic attack will often, especially at first when they don't know what it is, will even say they think they're dying. They feel they have chest pains. It seems like almost like symptoms of a heart attack. And there is an overwhelming sense of dread and anxiety attached to it, which makes them think they're dying. To be honest, if a person is having one of these for the first time, it isn't a bad idea to go to the ER because you don't know. I mean, it is often very similar to the symptoms of a heart attack. But people in the hospital, when they check your heart, can tell very quickly that it isn't that, and that it is an anxiety attack. Anxiety attacks usually do. Panic attacks go away on their own, usually within a certain period of time, half hour. But panic attacks can happen in two different ways. In some cases, people have them when they are up against the thing that's stressing them out. So, for example, you have a fear of, I have a fear of heights, okay? So, when I'm not in a height situation, I'm fine. But as soon as I get into one, boom, I can have a panic attack. All right, that is usually diagnosed as a phobia because there is a panic attack, but it is directly related to the exposure to whatever it is that's freaking you out. All right. What's more difficult to pinpoint or to even treat is something we call panic disorder, where people are having those panic attacks, but they're seemingly random. They just come on. A person could just be sitting there and they're not exposed to anything that's freaking them out, and all of a sudden they have one. Now, the thinking is there might be a trigger that is unconscious and they're not aware of it, but sometimes it may just be, we don't know. We don't know. All right. So when we get into treatments, the treatment is different. If you have treatment, for phobia, you can treat that panic when you deal with a phobia. Somebody's having panic attacks randomly, it can be a lot tougher. And some people think that agoraphobia, which is fear of being in public, is a direct relation to someone with panic disorder. Because if you have panic disorder, you don't know when it's coming on, you don't know what's going to trigger it, it's hard to go out of your house. You don't want to be out. It's embarrassing to have a panic attack. Some people, not only do they draw attention to themselves because they're hyperventilating and all this, but also some people actually can pass out, they can mess themselves, so they don't want to be out when this happens, and so what do? They keep themselves in. All right, so that's, again, another version, but anxiety, the major symptom. The other one that we did in the play, in another relatively common disorder, is something called obsessive compulsive disorder, and this one kind of bridges between two categories, between what we would call definitely anxiety it used to be considered a pure anxiety disorder because anxiety is so much of a part of it. But it's also now considered partly an impulse control disorder. It's sort of its own thing now. Um, OCD is one that, again, people that are not psychologists often misname. They'll say uh, somebody's a little bit picky about things, and they'll say, oh, they have OCD. Uh, Probably not. Um, that may be something more like a compulsive personality disorder, which we will get to, but not OCD. OCD, the main point of OCD or the harder part to understand is the obsessions. Obsessions are repetitive thoughts that an individual has great difficulty getting out of their mind. In OCD, these thoughts are negative because they're causing anxiety. If I had a positive thought, like I was gonna win $1 million, that's not a disorder. I think that'd be cool. All right, but it's distressing to have a negative thought over and over and over. And usually they take the form of things like something bad is going to happen to me or to someone I love, or I'm going to do something bad. So they're negative thoughts that don't go away. They go around and around and around. And you know what? One of the things we've been finding is with brain scans with people who have OCD, it's that center part of the brain. We have an area of the brain that basically inhibits thoughts, allows us to stop thinking about something that we don't want to think about. People with OCD have a problem with that, and it's just that it's like an infinite loop. The thought causes anxiety. The only way to stop it is to do the rituals or the compulsions. These are little behaviors, actions that are in that person's mind designed to stop the obsessions, and not only stop the thought, but actually stop the bad event from happening. All right. So some of the thinking is that this is a way of gaining control. So for example, if sometimes the compulsions fit somewhat with the obsession. Let's say one of my things, like right now, I mean, I'm sure that this whole situation with the virus is triggering a lot of this with someone who might be a little bit of germ phobic. So for example, if I had a phobia about getting sick and worried I was going to get the virus, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I wanted some control over not only thinking but prevent myself from getting sick. What do? I do a compulsion to stop it. Washing my hands over and over and over again. All right, what's sometimes there is no compulsion that fits. What if my worry is that I'm going to be in a plane crash? All right, well, obviously I don't have to, but let's say I'm going on a plane. Little rituals I have to do to prevent that from happening. Or someone else, I have to flip a light switch or count my steps. The thing with OCD is it's irrational. So here's again, we all do little bits like this, little rituals, little superstitions. We may think, oh, leave the house and you have this thought in your head and you forgot to turn something off. What do? You go back and you check. You go back once. People with OCD can't. That's not enough. It's over and over and over, where they're washing their hands 50 times, or they're taking showers and they have to change their clothes, or they have to check the door or check the light switch over and over and over and over again. Sometimes it's a certain number. Most people with OCD have a favorite number, or even odd. And if they are prevented from doing that, they might even have a panic attack. All right, but the ritual is designed to stop the anxiety. Interestingly, the majority of people with OCD know on some level that what they're doing is weird and irrational. But that doesn't make them stop. This is why they're thinking there's a brain issue here, because they know it, but they can't seem to stop. And again, so that's where you get into the impulse control part of OCD. We know that certain medications, like antidepressants, can help a lot. Anti-anxiety drugs can help in anxiety disorders, but a lot of the anti-anxiety drugs are benzodiazepines, which can be very addictive and are hard to take over long periods of time. So if you're talking about someone who has an ongoing anxiety disorder, it's sometimes better to use antidepressants. There's a very close relationship with anxiety, depression. It's mood disorders in a way. All right, the other group of disorders that were illustrated in my play were a group of disorders called somatoform disorders. These are ones where anxiety is the major symptom, but it is coming out in a physical type of way. So and some of these have two different names. If you see your term sheets, you'll see two different terms because the DSM changed the terms, but you still hear both. So, for example, there's something called somatization disorder, or today called somatic symptom disorder. All right, what this is someone has a bunch of mild, relatively common, probably stress-related symptoms like headache, muscle pains, fatigue, maybe hives, most likely caused from stress and anxiety. We all can have those. The problem with in this disorder is, though, the person becomes obsessed by this. They go to doctor after doctor, just thinking their normal stress reactions doesn't suit, and it just becomes like they focus their whole lives around the disorder. They're not really exaggerating it. They have symptoms, but they're probably just kind of garden variety anxiety, stress related, but they become obsessed by it, so that it almost like becomes a career of looking for help for this disorder. All right. Similar, but different in this major way, is what we would call, or used to call, hypochondriasis, today called illness anxiety disorder. This is someone who has maybe some minor symptoms, but assumes it's the worst. All right, so the headache is a tumor. I'm sneezing. I have a virus. I have this virus. Or, I have a stomach ache. It's cancer. That kind of a thing. So they might actually have symptoms, but they are blowing it out to the worst possible scenario. This happens a lot even in time, like every little thing you're looking for, and you're in the internet, you're reading medical books, and you think you have all these worst, horrible things. That's what we mean by hypochondriasis. Now, in this disorder, people are not faking, and we all do this. I know most of us are doing this right now. But again, with someone who truly has this disorder, it's monopolizing their time. All right, this is not faking. They really believe they have these. All right, they just don't. Okay. Another disorder is something called conversion disorder. Luckily, this one's a little more rare, a little more, well, it could be a lot more serious, at least in some respects. A conversion disorder is when a person has a major physical symptom without any cause for it that's physical. So, in other words, usually it takes the form in my play, someone was all of a sudden deaf, they couldn't hear anything. I believe that was me, too. People can have become blind, like overnight. They can't see. They become, maybe a part of them becomes paralyzed. But there is no physical cause for it. It's psychological. Here, usually these happen after a trauma. So, for example, let's say you're driving down the road and you come across a horrific accident and you see things you don't want to see. The next day, you are blind. You can't see. Your brain is basically shut down your eyes. Your eyes are fine. Your eyes are all working, but your brain is not processing it. It's like it has shut it down because it can't handle the trauma anymore. An example of a conversion disorder that you probably have heard of is something that may be commonly called a hysterical pregnancy. Usually happens with a woman who is having some kind of a major issue with pregnancy. Maybe they've lost a baby, or they can't get pregnant, and it's causing major trauma to them. And so their brain now tricks their body into having signs of pregnancy. But there is no baby. And they really believe it. Again, these people aren't faking. All right. Again, one of the hard parts of treating this is people think they're faking, but they're not. So we need to get in a conversion disorder. You have to, first of all, make sure you are ruling out any physical cause, but then also working with that person to figure out what was the trigger, what was it that made this person brain want to protect their body. All right, now those are the ones that are in your text, and again, these are real symptoms. These are not people that are faking. All right, clearly people do fake illness, okay, but that's not one of the disorders we just talked about. All right, people do something called malingering. Malingering is when people will fake an illness to get something material out of it, usually drugs. It's like, say they have a back pain when they don't, just to get pain meds. Or sometimes we'll do that in order, fraud, trying to get out of work or doing something like that. But again, that's faking, lying. The person knows very well what they're doing. There's also something called Munchausen. Munchausen is when a person will fake an illness, or sometimes even cause their own illness, in order to get attention. This is a person who loves being the center of attention. Maybe they like getting ambulance people to come get them and going to the hospital. So they do things in order to get that treatment. And they either lie and fake it, or they sometimes hurt themselves. They might actually cut themselves on purpose or poison themselves in order to get the medical attention. Um, One that you've heard of is something called Munchausen by proxy. And this is when you do it to someone else. And usually the scenario is you have a parent who purposely hurts their child, poisoning, smothering, in order to get their child help and be the mother or the father of the sick child. They like that attention. That's, yes, child abuse, and against the law. But it also is a mental health disorder because it isn't mentally normal to purposely want to hurt your child just to get attention. Right? So again, those are different because while they are disorders to some degree, they are also intentional acts. The other disorders, the somatoform disorders that we just mentioned, though, are not fakers. All right, they're just people that have some kind of a fear or an anxiety that is translating it into an actual physical symptom. All right, so that's a little overview of the anxiety disorders. We will be moving on to the dissociative and personality disorders and a little bit of overview and treatments on our next videos. So long.